whenever volume is talked about in lifting, it's too isolated. It's not in context. All we're told about these studies is that more volume equals more muscle. And that's all well and good, but there are other factors in real life. Notably, your ability to recover, injuries, specifically the ability of your connective tissues to recover, and injuries to your connective tissue. And so it's kind of like not useful information, really. Because, I mean, I guess it's helpful to know, but I think by now most people know that, intuitively, the more you lift, the more benefit you're going to get from it. If those were the only factors, if recovery was not a factor, then obviously it would be the more you do, the more you get. I mean, if we had like super healing, if we were all Wolverine or something, then yeah, duh. If you just worked out and you recovered from it within the next like 6 hours, then you should work out again in 6 hours. But the biggest problem with these studies is that a lot of things are cumulative. Like, you can handle a certain volume for maybe a couple of months, and then it's going to really start to catch up with you. Like, all kinds of different things, like depending on the person and their age, their tendons are going to start to break down. Their nervous system's going to be fried. They just systemically are going to start to just wear down. Because it happens to me all the time. I'll be all like loaded for bear to lift, and I'll lift for a couple months, and I'll still be good. But then a couple more months down the line, I am just like beat to shit, man. I'm just like dragging myself into the gym. And so I realized that I either need to lift at a lower volume, or I need to do like what Mike Israetel recommends and periodize my training. Like, I can go that hard, but then at some point I'm not going to be able to go that hard, so that I can recover, so that I can go that hard again. So like, when they just put out a study that says, oh, if you do like 50 sets of something in a week, that's going to, optimize your hypertrophy. Well, so what? That still doesn't mean you should do 50 sets a week, so what's the point? I mean, I guess if we're trying to settle the question of like, should you only do one set or something? I mean, I think that's pretty much been settled. And this is coming from someone that really wanted like Mike Mentzer stuff to be true, because it just appeals to so many different things in my personality. Like, one, I'm kind of lazy, It's like, if I don't overcomplicate anything in my life. I do the minimum that gets the job done, because it got the job done. Why would I do any more than that? So it appeals to that. And then it appeals to, I also really like the elegance of simplicity. I don't, not only just out of laziness, but also just like the way my brain works. Like, when you're trying to cloud the issue with a bunch of different things that are superfluous in my mind, I want the simplest, most elegant solution from that standpoint as well. And so that it appealed to me in that. And then, especially when I was younger, it appealed to this idea that like only the baddest dudes can do this, because, you have to push yourself. You have to have such an intense set that's all you need for the week, And in order to do that, you have to like do like some kind of crazy shit, like, some set of 25 on a leg press that just like, not any person can endure that kind of torture. And, So it gives you this idea like you're a bad dude while also doing the least possible. So it's a pretty good deal. It's a pretty psychologically appealing thing that he was selling. So it's disappointing, but I think that I think it's been pretty well proven that that is not the way to train. At least not for most people. I don't know. Somehow, I guess it was working for him. I don't know. I think he had already probably built his body and taken a ton of steroids before he ever, stumbled upon this idea. So that probably has a lot to do with it. But I mean, some people like training like that, and I think what happens is some people have success with it just because they're genetic freaks. Like, it doesn't matter how they lift. They probably do respond to one set a week because they're just that genetically gifted. And maybe additional sets, wouldn't have as much of an impact on them because they're already like ultra responders, But I think the science is like very clear and compelling and overwhelming. That more volume than that is good. So I guess if we're trying to like settle this iron of like whether there's ever a reason to do less than you can handle, no. I think you always want to do as much as you can handle, but I just think these studies might be giving some people the wrong impression of, how to define what they can handle, and it's causing people to overtrain. I think it basically, I guess the point I'm making is the limiting factor isn't really how many sets will maximize muscle growth. The limiting factor is going to be how many sets you can handle. Because how many sets you can handle is always going to be less than how many sets will optimize muscle growth. So I think, as much as I'm not really like a huge fan of Mike Israetel, I think he might be onto something where like you should periodize your training where like you're pushing yourself to the max possible that you can handle and then backing off when it's more than you can handle, because that way that at least like for periods of time you're doing the absolute max and maybe even more than the max that you can handle. But I also don't think that's really necessary either. I think if you can find like a happy medium, like if you just through trial and error, years of experience, you find out that, hey, what I can handle is to bench once a week, I can do like 3 to 5 sets of like a heavy bench, but I can only do it once a week. Then if you've truly figured that out, then I don't think that's really going to be any worse, or not a lot worse, than the way Mike Israetel tells you to do it. I think it might be slightly less optimal just because with the Mike Israetel method, you can like constantly be testing the limit, You can constantly basically like putting yourself in an overtrained state and then pulling back when you have to. But I feel like with enough experience and trial and error, you can get yourself to where, you're just barely doing enough to stimulate without, you're right up to that limit where you're not burning yourself out. But yeah, that's just generally my criticism of a lot of these volume studies is there's still a lot of interpretation and experience that goes into it, and that that you'd have to apply to it. I mean, to make it useful, and that's why these quote unquote science-based lifters, that's where they come in for criticism. And then when they come in for criticism, they claim that the people that are criticizing them are anti-science. It's not that people are anti-science. The world isn't that black and white. I'm not anti-science. I just don't think that these studies capture all of the variables. And so you can't really have a nerd approach. You have to have experience in the gym. That's the only way to figure out how you should be lifting. The science can be a guide. It can kind of like give you some ideas of what to play with in the gym. But the problem comes in when they act like these studies have basically, you know, given the end all be all word, and they've told you how to lift. Okay, they said do 50 sets. Go ahead and try it. Go out and do 50 sets a week of bench press or something, and you'll realize that the study didn't give you the answer. The study just gave you some data to think about as you're figuring it out yourself.